Pádraig, do you think that the IRA personnel who murdered these two officers had a duty to do so?
I believe that the IRA were fighting a legitimate war. I believe that they were young men and women who had suffered at the hands of the RUC, who policed an apartheid, sectarian Orange state. That is the reason why today we no longer have an RUC. Earlier today, Mr McBurney referred to the IRA as terrorists. My father was an IRA man. My father was a young man like thousands of others who joined the IRA. He spent 9 years in English jails. I can tell you, Mr McBurney, my father was no terrorist. So many families are hurt by the conflict, and many families need to have answers.
What's so bad about calling somebody a terrorist? They inflicted terror on other people. Of course they were terrorists.
Mr McBurney would give an analysis that the RUC were angels and saints, and that young Irish Republicans were terrorists.
Is it your opinion that the people who murdered these two RUC officers had a duty to do so?
I believe that they had a duty as much as Michael Collins and the IRA of the War of Independence, as much as Pádraig Pearse or James Connolly, every generation of Irish people who stood up to oppression. And the young Irish men and women in the 6 counties who stood up to oppression had a right to take a war in the absence of political leadership. When political leadership finally came, thank God, those days are over. See, that's the context in which this happens, and Mr McBurney will present one side as angels and saints. The RUC were a sectarian Orange state enforcer. They harassed and harangued and oppressed the nationalist people,
and there was a duty to murder them.
In a war situation, tragically,
a duty
I believe in a war situation,
a duty to murder these two people.
In a war situation, the same as the old IRA who killed almost 500 RIC members back in the War of Independence.
I think a lot of viewers will find it quite chilling that you think there was a duty to murder these two people.
I believe that the IRA volunteers and the 2 senior RUC men, Harry Breen and Bob Buchanan, who were killed, were all caught up in a profound tragedy. There were no goodies or baddies. All of them were failed politically. And I will not stand back and let my father be vilified while others are presented as heroes.
Don't mind your father. Your father had nothing to do with the issue that we're talking about.
Yes, he was. He was an IRA man.
He had nothing to do with the point.
He had everything to do with the issue.
And we're talking now about your contention, Gerry Adams' contention. There was a duty to murder these two people.
I believe that the IRA war was a tragedy, but I believe that the men and women of the IRA deserve the same respect and stature as the members of the RUC, the UDR, the British. They were all human beings with families who were caught up in a tragedy. That's what I believe, and I'm not going to stand here.
There's a duty to murder Harry Breen, who came out of the car that was surrounded by IRA men, came out of the car waving a handkerchief. There was a duty to murder that defenceless man.
I'm saying to you, and I'll say it again.
You think there was a duty to murder that defenceless man who was waving a white handkerchief?
What I believe is that the RUC were part of a state apparatus that oppressed the nationalist people in an Orange state.
Just to deal with this specific question I'm asking you. Are you saying that there was a duty, not just that they were entitled to, but there was a duty on the part of the IRA people to murder this defenceless man who got out of the car waving a white handkerchief?
Every soldier and combatant in a conflict, yes, has a duty to prosecute a war tragically. Yes, that is the case. Just as the RUC officers had a duty to do their job. That's the tragedy of the conflict. But we're not going to tolerate a narrative that says that we had goodies on one side and baddies on the other. And we're not going to tolerate a narrative that suggests that all of those young men and women
utterly chilling. I think that'd be... Charlie, what do you think of this?
Well, I found the remarks of Gerry Adams to be quite contemptible this morning.
And how about the remarks of Pádraig?
In the aftermath of the report, and I would expect that Pádraig, as a member of Dáil Éireann, elected by the people, would have taken the opportunity tonight to distance himself from the comments of Gerry Adams.
You distance yourself from Fine Gael, from Sean McKeown. Sean McKeown, your Minister for Justice, who was responsible for killing dozens of RIC men. Do you distance yourself from them? Do you distance yourself from the leaders of the IRA who gave birth to your party? The reason why you're a TD today, do you distance yourself from them? No, it's not. It's exactly the same. Do you distance yourself from them? It's rank hypocrisy to listen to this from you.
Are you going to deny me an opportunity now of speaking?
Don't be a hypocrite.
I'm not a hypocrite.
Rank hypocrisy.
What we saw from your leader this morning is indicative of the fact that nothing has changed as far as Sinn Féin is concerned. That Gerry Adams, in the aftermath of the publication of a report that showed for the first time, evidence of collusion in a brutal, cold-blooded, outrageous murder of 2 officers of the state in the course of their duty. And Gerry Adams, in some way, tried to make a case that these people were in some way responsible themselves for their downfall. I think, quite frankly, it's outrageous, and I think your comments this evening are equally outrageous as far as the matter is concerned.
Do you think that Gandhi and Martin Luther King
I'm not talking about Gandhi or Martin Luther King.
Your party celebrates Michael Collins every year.
I'm talking about the campaign of terror.
What about the campaign of war that Michael Collins
prosecuted? I'm talking about the campaign of terror that was by and large perpetrated by your associates in Northern Ireland and in this jurisdiction
every year at Michael Collins where he was assassinated. Every year you gather, it is rank hypocrisy. Rank hypocrisy. You would tell the Irish people that Gandhi and Martin Luther King founded your party. It is outrageous hypocrisy, and it needs to stop.
A member of Sinn Féin invoking the name of Gandhi
or Nelson Mandela ever say that people had a duty to murder other people?
Well, Gandhi and Martin Luther King were, first of all,
a duty to murder other people.
Gandhi and Martin Luther King were advocates of non-violence. Fine Gael are brought into this place they are today from violence, tragically, and this is the story we
I never heard anybody in Fine Gael or in Fianna Fáil ever say that there was a duty to murder anybody in any circumstance.
So Michael Collins had no duty. So Michael Collins had no duty to be responsible for the killing of almost 500 RIC men, shot in the back coming out of churches, shot in front of their children. What about the people that were killed in the War of Independence?
Yes, but I never heard
duty, but not the duty of Irish Republicans.
I just repeat, I have never ever heard anybody say that Michael Collins had a duty to ensure the murder of these people.
So none of them had a duty in a war, and none of their soldiers.
Sarah.